The top story is one Donald Trump can't escape as he caps the worst start to a month of his second term. From the Dem wins to the Epstein email explosion this week, he is having a tough November. These new Epstein emails have upended the White House, and they're only getting worse because it takes time, even in our rapid information environment, for journalists and politicos and any citizen who wants to look and go through these 20,000 emails. All of this started when Democrats used their power to push the envelope and release some of the emails, the ones they said showed why Trump is hiding, as they demand a vote to release them all. Republicans got mad, remember, in the week and said, oh, well, we'll release more. And so what started with 3 emails turned to 20,000. Tonight, I have more details on how it's all going, because this is a vast tranche of documents, of emails, that many people, clearly from the way they were typing to Epstein, thought would stay secret forever. Epstein made the biggest news, perhaps, from the grave, so to speak, with his now unearthed statement to Maxwell, a sex trafficker convicted and in prison right now, that, of course, Trump knew about the girls. Donald Trump has denied any wrongdoing and has very specifically tried to deny that he knew what Epstein was exactly up to, although the Trump story on that has changed, and that is getting new scrutiny right now. There is also how the Trump DOJ has dealt with Maxwell and her controversial interview with a former Trump defense lawyer who now is paid by your tax dollars to do the people's business at the Trump DOJ. But it looks like Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche may not have been doing the people's business. We'll get to that. But in this exchange from 2011, Epstein wrote to Maxwell Trump was spending, quote, hours at his house with one of the victims. Maxwell said she's been thinking about that, as they said that Trump was the dog that didn't bark. That matters for many reasons, but specifically whether Deputy Attorney General Blanche is worried about later professional sanctions or misconduct or even potentially being disbarred if this is part of a larger cover-up. It obviously contradicts what Maxwell apparently falsely claimed, with no repercussions yet, when she had her cozy interview with Deputy Attorney General Blanche just months ago.
I think they were friendly, like people are in social settings. I don't think they were close friends, or I certainly never witnessed the president in any of, I don't recall ever seeing him in his house, for instance.
Something she suddenly says she didn't recall when the emails say she did. If the Trump DOJ were on the level, and this is now public, at a minimum, they would go deal with this with her. At a maximum, remember, even when you're in prison, if you mislead the federal government, if you provide false statements to a federal officer, that could be a new crime. And yet they're not obviously doing anything like that. They're giving her special treatment and a puppy in prison, and we'll get to that. Blanche says that for some reason, quote, law enforcement didn't have those emails when he did the interview. As I've reported to you, he said, when I interviewed Maxwell, quote, law enforcement didn't have the materials Epstein's estate, quote, hid for years and only provided to Congress. That statement is highly suspicious, and it is now getting debunked by the Epstein estate, which says we hadn't received any requests from DOJ in recent years, emphasis on recent years, I'll come back to that, but they say, and these are the ones who have been lately more transparent, of course, working for the Epstein estate sounds controversial, but Epstein's dead. These are the people who manage the estate. These are lawyers who have their own obligations. They are the ones who provided these emails. So they might have more credibility than Mr. Blanche right now. And they say tonight it's inaccurate for Blanche and Trump DOJ to assert the estate has hidden anything. And let me tell you a bit more about that. You might say, okay, Ari, with everything going on, why are we diving into a debate between anonymous lawyers or random obscure lawyers at the Epstein estate and the Deputy Attorney General? Well, the Deputy Attorney General is responding because he's under pressure. The interview, many legal experts have said, looked suspicious at the time. Now it looks like outright cover-up, potential misconduct. And so he says law enforcement didn't have the materials. He tries to go after the Epstein estate. Maybe he didn't realize they would come back at him. They're saying his whole defense that they hid anything is wrong, is inaccurate. Another word for that would be a lie if they think he knows that it's inaccurate. But more to the point, they didn't use the underlying original nonpartisan career prosecutors who led the Maxwell case. That was suspicious. I pointed that out at the time. Those prosecutors probably know everything that they requested, including the first step you take in this kind of probe, which is to try to get emails and texts, and you go to the telecommunications providers. You don't even need to get them from Epstein. We would know more about that if the Trump DOJ was on the level. And then remember, on top of that, they then fired the person who actually won Maxwell's conviction, Maureen Comey. So there's a lot more smoke here and a lot more questions, and a real investigation can get to the bottom of it. Now, you might say, are we going to get to the bottom of anything? Seems like a lot of secrecy and a lot of corruption these days. Well, you're right if you think that. And there are a lot of places where Congress doesn't do anything, and a lot of places where Republicans won't stand up to Donald Trump. That is a well-known pattern. And yet here we are ending this bruising week for Trump with an unusual headline. Republicans revolting. Congress, which is controlled by Republicans, will actually hold this vote next week on releasing more of the Epstein files. Epstein accusers imploring lawmakers to vote yes. That's part of the public pressure. They write, there's no hiding behind party affiliation. When you vote, we will remember your decision at the ballot box. And there has certainly been a nonpartisan or transpartisan movement with growing heat to get to the bottom of this. Trump is trying to deflect. He made an announcement today that itself is illicit and suspicious. He now says he wants the DOJ to investigate whether there were other crimes or Epstein's relationship with Bill Clinton and other figures, and he names the bank, J.P. Morgan, tech entrepreneur Reid Hoffman, and others. Now just think about that. I know we live in cynical times, but if this government, from the president on down, thinks there was sex trafficking with any of those people, or J.P. Morgan, which of course was very controversial in how it handled Epstein's banking, just think about what Trump just admitted, that they haven't really pursued that. This is his DOJ. He was in charge in the first term. They could have looked at all of that. That's when the initial Epstein case came. He's been in charge now, as you know, for this year. And yet, that announcement, if you take it at its word, admits they haven't done it, and there may be crimes, and now they want to do it. That implicates Donald Trump, if you take him at his word. If you don't take him at his word and you think this is a giant distraction, an effort to use the real crimes and victims and sex trafficking that did occur in a politicized way to go after other people and distract from himself, well, that's even more disgusting and cynical. And if you know this program, I don't use those words often or lightly, but it is indeed disgusting. If you have an oath to uphold the Constitution and enforce the laws, and here you are abusing and misusing that responsibility to play political games, and your pawns or chess pieces in that are the women and girls who actually were the victims of these crimes, we do need to maintain our capacity both for outrage when it's warranted and a vigorous search for the truth, which is what the justice system is supposed to do. This is how it goes when Trump talks to reporters about this.
Mr. President, can you respond to these Epstein emails that were released today?
President Trump walked past reporters yesterday, as you see here, as they were asking him questions about the newly released Epstein emails.
Mr. President, any comment on these Epstein emails, sir?
Now, not a lot of response from a normally voluble figure there. The conservative Wall Street Journal, owned by Rupert Murdoch, says, as is so often the case, Trump has been his own worst enemy here. He looks like he has something to hide, even if he doesn't. Now, let me tell you a word about that even if. Even if he doesn't have something to hide is charitable. But he does have something to hide. He's in the Epstein files. He's in Epstein's secret emails to a convicted sex trafficker, Maxwell, to Steve Bannon. People are getting more details on those as everyone pours through what is 20,000 documents. Some of them are quite interesting. Some of them are random. Some of them, the House release involves public information like pages from a book. So you go through all this in the reporting process. But he clearly has something to hide because he's been fighting even this disclosure, which shows he's in the files. And he's fighting the next possible disclosure, which suggests he's in the files again. As for Maxwell, she has the audacity or the sex trafficking chutzpah to use this period to prepare to ask Trump to let her out of prison. Something that would seem unthinkable unless you think, again, he would rather take the hit for that to maintain her as some sort of non-credible source to defend him. Unlike other prisoners, Maxwell already reportedly gets unlimited supplies, special treatment, quote, customized meals personally delivered to her cell, a private exercise area, access to this much maligned service puppy. She says it's safer and more comfortable. I feel like I've dropped through Alice in Wonderland Looking Glass. I'm much happier and safe, is her statement on the matter. Trump said he would not rule out freeing her. Think about that. He's on the run. He's in the files. And now, having campaigned on both transparency of releasing the files and justice and saying this whole pedophilia ring was a bad thing, he is now still leaving the door open to freeing from prison the only individual ever incarcerated for Epstein's related crimes. Now, we've heard so many lectures about how nothing changes and Trump has loyalty and he likes to tell people he could shoot someone on Fifth Avenue and get away with it. Well, that may not be true either. There are some problems, legal and otherwise, that Trump's base has excused. But right now, I showed you the Wall Street Journal. I showed you the Republicans in the House who overrode Trump's strategy here of secrecy. And other members of the MAGA base are upset. Newsweek reports on the threat to the Trump presidency now looks unlike anything we've seen before. And over across the whole country, his approval is cratering, MAGA loyalists concerned.
Across the Republican Party, there are calls for more disclosure.
The government will not protect the predators.
There is just nobody in the electorate who is buying this.
Trump could one-up him and say, well, Johnson wants to have the vote Wednesday. I want to release the Epstein files Tuesday. And he could literally be a hero.
I think it's a huge miscalculation.
He's alienated a lot of his base with his statement that you're no longer my supporter and you never were if this is what you're for.
Imagine what's going to continue to happen when you learn even more damning information. Trump continues his spiral, his cynical announcements, which may not be playing very well, and then you actually might get a vote to release the files.